Hi, how's it going? Today, I want to do a video about the closing of the College of St. Rose. And this is something I wanted to do for a little while. You might, if you saw the welcome video to my channel, might remember that part of what inspired me to start this YouTube channel about language and culture is the fact that the College of St. Rose is closing down. And so that's giving me some free time because I'm a faculty member there. I've been teaching French and, well, French language, identity, and culture for the last year there. And sadly, 12 days ago on Saturday, May 11th, we had our very last graduation ceremony ever. Because the college announced back on December 1st, I believe it was, of 2023, that they will be closing down for good after this academic year and not reopening next fall. So I guess that's one reason that this closure matters to me. I'm losing a job, but um, another is that this college is in my actual neighborhood. It's my very local college, not just same city, but I'm talking like a couple blocks away from my apartment, um, which has been the ideal commute time for me. It's a 5-minute walk out of my front door of my apartment right to my office hours on campus. So that has been pretty ideal for me. And so I guess myself, I'm dually impacted as a local resident and as an employer there. And so I guess, don't just take my word for it because clearly I have a bias of sorts. Um, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about um, why anybody else should care about the closing of the College of St. Rose. And so first, I guess that means I should um, describe a little bit more about what is the College of St. Rose and why does it matter. And so here we got the College of St. Rose homepage. And notice very first thing we see is about the uh closure announcement. And so one thing I wanted to mention too, remember, well, I said it was about December 1st, 2023, where the official press release was given and the school announced the closure. Um, some people have asked me if the faculty there, knew anything about this ahead of time. And the sad thing is, no, not a single word about it. Because I remember I learned that the college might be closing through my Google feed on my phone to a local news story in the Times-Union about maybe the college would be closing down and there would be a board meeting where they would vote the very next day. Um, and this was very late November, just going into final exam period for the college. So this for the students and the faculty, everything got flipped right upside down, right going into final exam period last semester. So I felt that was a huge disservice to all the students. And but anyway, um, like usual, the university administration was trying to control the narrative and uh, just release little bits of information that on their own timetable, but I guess they forgot about the free press. So thank you to the Times-Union for sharing that information with everybody ahead of time. And so here's getting back to what is the College of St. Rose and why should anybody care about its closing down. Um, let's just quick check out some fun facts about the college, just to give you an idea of the importance of it. For one, this was as of fall of 2022. This is the most recent update they've had on their website for this information. But look how it's a very small liberal arts college. Let's see if they give the actual number. Well, okay, we have about 2,600 students this year, including undergraduate and graduate students alike, and that number is down by a good 35% from 2019 before the year before the COVID-19 pandemic started, where we had about 4,000 students. And the school was founded in 1920 by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet, and it started out as a women's college only, and then grew to be co-education over the years. And one big mission that's always been in the forefront of St. Rose has been education and teaching future teachers. St. Rose has, for the last couple of decades, we've been certifying and producing more teachers than pretty much any other institution in New York State. Yeah, for decades now. So that is one thing I'll point to as far as what's the big loss of this college. Teachers are at a shortage right now in the Northeast, and this is going to really damage the whole that whole job sector if we have uh much in uh well, much fewer certified teachers coming out and joining the workforce. Things are going to get even worse. Um, and so another thing I wanted to point out here, founded in 1920 in the Pine Hills neighborhood in Albany, where St. Rose is, um, this neighborhood really grew up right around then. Like the houses nearby and all this, these were all built around 1920 and just before then. So St. Rose has been a really premier institution of this neighborhood since its very, very beginning. And that's another reason I think people other than just me should care about it, because I'm very much worried about how this is going to kill the neighborhood to leave 48 acres, meaning more than 80 properties in the same neighborhood, to leave those vacant. I hope they have a solution for that, because I think we might see a big exodus from this neighborhood, if we don't do something about that. So again, uh, teaching has been a very important part of the College of St. Rose through the Thelma P. Lally School of Education, where there are bachelor's and master's degrees in education, as well as certificate programs. Um, and like I said, we've been certifying more teachers every year than anybody else in New York State, and that's a huge loss to the education industry in New York State and beyond. And so, another thing that St. Rose has been producing a lot of are nurses, new nurses. We have a Bachelor of Science program in nursing, that has been producing a lot of that. And that has been a big shortage in the workforce lately too, is nurses. So again, I'm pointing to that as a good thing that's gonna re leave some real lasting damage by this college shutting down. And so this should matter to people beyond the faculty, staff, and students of the college, and even the residents of the neighborhood. And so let's go back to the announcement of their closing, and because I would like to sort of start getting at reasons why. And in the press release, you will see some of the things that people have been pointing to, well, that the administration pointed to as far as why the college is closing down. And right here it's saying 103-year-old institution, but that was in December. Now, the College of St. Rose has completed 104 total academic years, which is why the graduation ceremony on um, May 11th, 2024 was our 101st graduation ceremony of all, because founding in 1920, and then the very first graduating class was, I believe, 19 women in 1924. And so the graduating classes have been getting bigger and expanding into more areas ever since. Um, and so, as it says, um, yeah, the Board of Trustees decided to close the college at the end of the academic year. And this is a heck of a thing to tell us in the week uh, during final examination period. But anyway, and they start pointing to um, in the Northeast, there are a lot of small private colleges that are struggling. And that part of this is because of declining enrollment. And this predates the COVID-19 pandemic, actually. We have every year we have less and less 18-year-olds graduating from high school in New York State, where we have a lot of colleges. Same goes in New England. And so every single college out there is competing for a smaller and smaller pool of applicants. And so I think that needs to be considered too. This was sort of the struggling for enrollments was already a thing starting a couple years before the pandemic really hit. And then the pandemic really solidified it. Like I said earlier, in 2019, St. Rose had about 4,000 students, if you include the undergraduate and graduate students alike. And then this year it had only 12,600 students, which is a drop of 35%. And in a small school like this with a small endowment, you really need that tuition money and those enrollments to come in to even keep operating in the black instead of having a huge budget deficit. And that has been a big problem for the College of St. Rose, their budget deficit. And so moving down a little bit, I'm noticing college president Marcia White, our current president, and one thing I want to say in her defense is I don't blame the college closing down on her. I think this was already something, the financial troubles of the college were already disastrous. And I think that the accrediting board, the accrediting institution, which is why credits from St. Rose and many other colleges in the area are worth anything. They had threatened them to come up with and given them a 10-year deadline to prove financial solvency. And so Marcia White wasn't hired in until within the last few years. Um, I think during the pandemic, and she was the college's last-ditch effort to try and turn things around financially for them, but she inherited a pretty unfortunate situation. Um, and so one other thing I'd like to point out that the President mentioned was the projected operating cash deficit for this year at $11.3 million. That's one of the things that more student enrollments might have helped with. And so on top of the uh, budget deficit here, we had about one big thing that's being blamed on this is all this mortgage debt that the college owns. I think the college has about $80 million worth of properties between their 80 or 81 properties in Albany. And yet it's involved in a $48 million bonded mortgage debt. So the college doesn't actually own the properties all the way. These investors actually own much of this. And just getting back to about the College of St. Rose again, nearly 2,600 undergraduate and graduate students across 77 bachelor's, master's, certificate, dual, and accelerated programs. And all this is being lost. Although we did have the final graduation ceremony on May 11th, there's actually a summer session of courses going on, I think, which ends on June 21st to help some people get the last few credits they can, maybe even finishing up degrees before the colleges close down for good. And so this is, yeah, they're blaming this on enrollment declines in the COVID pandemic, and I think this is just part of the story. And so that's why I also wanted to mention um, another part of the story, a slightly yeah, slightly fleshed out uh account of what's going on. And I'm going to an article in the Times Union again, an online version of this article anyway. And so let me share that screen with you. And so this is pointing to a lot of the mortgage debts as parts of why the college is closing down. And this points out a couple interesting facts that to me explain how this college was um, in financial trouble for a while by the time the pandemic had even hit. And so as the college was losing enrollments, we cut some academic programs, which cutting academic programs, in my opinion, has never been and never will be a decent way to attract more students. That's not what it brings people to campus. Opportunities are what brings to people to campus, and you offer them less and less opportunities. Unsurprisingly, many decide not to come. And so of course, another thing I had mentioned earlier is the dwindling number of 18-year-olds and people graduating from high school. This is to a much larger trend than just St. Rose is dealing with. This is all over the northeastern US where we have a huge number of colleges. Um, we have less and less people graduating high school every year. And so higher education is very dependent on specific age brackets. And so you have a dwindling population within this age bracket, then you have all the different colleges competing for a dwindling pool of people. So there will be big downsides, and that is capitalism for you. Because unfortunately, that I point to is why St. Rose is closing down is because unfortunately in the United States of America, we consider and treat higher education as big business. And of course, why wouldn't you? It costs so much money. You end up with such a debt at the end of it all. It's very big business. And this is why I support efforts of countries like Canada and France to keep higher education within reach for all citizens because it's a public commodity. It's of a right, uh, in my opinion, that we should all have as much education and access to education as possible because isn't that what builds the best workforce? At least in my opinion, that is. And so, in addition to the dwindling population numbers of college age people, now I want to point to something else I found in this article. Um, Let me scroll down to the size difference. Is it mentioned here? Okay, yeah, there's more than 80 buildings that will now be vacant. Um, and does this one include? Um, that's the same. I'm not finding this. Anyway, there will be, anyway, I will just speak of it without sharing in that case. Um, One way that the College of St. Rose got themselves into this big debt mess, they got into indebted up to their ears, is, in 1999, and this was also reported in the Times Union. Unfortunately, apparently it was not that article that I had open, but they had in 1999, the College of St. Rose had 22 properties in the Pine Hills neighborhood, and they about tripled the size of that campus from 1999 until 2015, when they had, instead of 22, now 68 properties. And it's along those times where the mortgage debts were incurred, and the $48 million bonded mortgage, which I believe is mostly um, intertwined between three of the most valuable properties of them all, and the college's debt on them. And so, ironically, in 2015, the college had still been growing and growing, and asked locals around here. They snatched up a lot of the properties in that couple block area, all the little residential houses that were adjacent to campus. Well, not all, but many became part of the College of St. Rose, including well, many houses that are now departmental and faculty offices and whatnot, and for many other purposes. And so, um, when you have a college that's having an operating budget budget deficit annually of 10 million, $11 million or so per year, and then you've got this huge bonded mortgage on it that you can't afford to pay, eventually um you have to close your doors because you cannot maintain accreditation as a college or a university if you cannot prove that you're financially solvent enough to stay open for people to be able to complete their degrees that they signed up for when they enrolled in your college. So all of this is huge tragedy for students, especially. Research on research on what happens when colleges close down and how that impacts the students and their educational quest does not paint a good picture. Um, at St. Rose, for example, we had some of our students were able to graduate in May. So a lot of them this last semester was just all about, okay, we're in it together until we finish it because everything's finishing at the same time. And then you have the other people who were not in a position to be able to earn all the credits they needed to complete their degree by May, given that they were only given like a 6 month advanced time, heads up. And for them, uh, research has shown, and with the closings of other schools in the last few years in the Northeast, that many of them, that's it. They don't go back to college, pretty much. And I think that's more than half. I think it's something like 54% of the students who did not graduate will not be returning to college. Now, among the other 46% who eventually will, a good um, third of those take at least a year off or so, take some gap time and all that before returning to college, which if you've ever been in that position, you might recognize as that will be a big stumbling block because you'll need so many more credits earned once you're back there. And just catching up on the education and all the concepts, getting all that to flood back in your head, that will take a while. So I wouldn't recommend to anybody to take time off, but it is a stressful situation applying to colleges left and right and trying to work out how you're going to afford any of them anyway. And so the college is closing for a few reasons. One is a larger trend of less high school graduates. And combined with that, you have less people wanting to go to college in the first place. A lot of people are choosing to do trade schooling or learn a vocation and skip university altogether so as not to incur all the debt that comes with student loans and all of this and getting paid well. And then, of course, we have the college tripling its size from 1999 up to 2015. But the thing is, the enrollment was not growing that whole time because in 2015, the student body was actually about 15, 16% less than it had been in 2008. So that's not growth. That's barely treading water, barely maintaining. So um, I don't see how they were predicting that they would be able to afford all those new properties without doubling, tripling the size of the student body at the same time. And yeah, and so who gets impacted besides the students? You got, of course, the faculty and staff. My last day of employment there was about a week ago or so on May 16th, 5 days after the last graduation ceremony, because of course, if we're not offering any more French classes, there's no work for me there. And yeah, and so again, this brings me to why I started this YouTube channel about language and culture. because I was teaching in the Department of World Languages and Cultures. And so I wanted this little YouTube channel to be one last bastion of that department still existing even after the college closes down. So let's hope that I can maintain the channel as long as possible. And so one other thing that I brought up as far as why should anybody care that this college is closing down? The teaching profession has been suffering, and with less and less teachers wanting to enter and high turnover among new teachers, people leaving the vocation entirely, we really need more certified teachers coming into the pool and mix and into the pool and not less. Um, Because everybody knows that less teachers equals bigger class sizes equals poor educational opportunities, and less educational opportunities. And none of this is good at any level of education, not primary, middle school, high school, any of it. And of course, nursing. I also mentioned how it will be hard to be finding new nurses in the capital district of New York State if St. Rose is not producing so many of them. And yeah, lastly of all, I'm most worried about the city of Albany, who our population has been dropping a little bit at a time. And when we fell below the 100,000 resident mark, that cost us a lot of financing from the state and federal government and all this. So it's really not good that I'm predicting an exodus from the Pine Hills neighborhood, which is pretty much we're talking Midtown Albany, New York. Um, this will not be any good. And people think of Albany as an affluent place because the state government is here and all that, but see, that's the problem. The state owns all the most expensive properties in the city of Albany, and they're tax exempt, so they don't pay property taxes on those. So Albany's no richer from in that respect than anywhere else. And yet we do have to maintain a lot of this. And again, Pine Hills neighborhood in Albany, what I'm hoping is that it will turn around and get better with the rebuilding and reuse of this campus. It's very big section of Albany, New York. Which my hope would be that another small liberal arts college comes in who would also like to train a lot of future teachers. That would be my hope for it. And also because part of the benefit of the neighborhood when you have a little college campus there, a lot of the businesses in the neighborhood depend on the commerce of people who work there, people going to school there, and all that on the local neighborhood. And so I'm very worried about the businesses in this neighborhood. Um, and if the businesses go, I think the residents are going to go too. But anyway, so what's next for the college, for the campus? People do not really have much predicting. Um, well, many valid predictions. Part of the problem is that the bonded mortgage debt is really that debt is owed to these out of town investors, and they will have a right to decide how they get compensated, how their properties get liquidated, and all of this. So the city of Albany really doesn't have much of a choice in this. And especially because the city doesn't own any of these properties. Now, there has been a proposal. to sort of get away with taking away that right from those bondholders by creating something. I'm trying to remember who proposed it. I think maybe Dan McCoy, the Albany County executive. And so I'm trying to look at, let's see, mm, there we go. I'm gonna share this screen with you too because it's a pretty radical maneuver he's proposing. And yet it might actually be the most helpful to the county and the city and the neighborhood of all. So yeah, I was right. It's the Albany County Executive. He has a Hail Mary plan for part of the St. Rose campus anyway. So now he's talking, this is Dan McCoy. And so his plan would involve a new public authority buying a large portion of the campus. And so this new public authority would have to be created. Shoot, I can't continue reading without a prescription, without a subscription. Um, but anyway, the new public authority would be able to allow the state to buy up the county property, buy up the campus properties, and then do with it as needed as would be good for the city and the community. And so this is a story I'd like to keep my eye on to see if anything comes of this, because that's the only way that it's not going to be entirely up to capitalist private investors what happens to this neighborhood. Mm. Anyway, so I think I've probably taken up plenty of your time to yeah, as far as all of this, obviously this is something I care about. I'm being dually impacted as an employee as well as a resident of the neighborhood, but I hope that I have mentioned some facts that at least would which would help mm, convince you that other people should care too. And the last note I want to make is that in upstate New York, St. Rose is only one of at least three colleges right now that I know that are closing at the end of this academic year. First one I heard of was Cazenovia College in Cazenovia, New York, small private liberal arts college. And then I heard about St. Rose. And then just a few weeks ago, a couple weeks before the end of the spring semester, then all of a sudden, Wells College announces that it's going to close. And I couldn't believe it because I was mad enough that St. Rose only gave us like 6 months or so of a notice before the college closes. Wells College, they only give people a couple weeks notice. And so I'm horrified from an HR perspective about, you know, what they're doing to their employees and staff. And also from a humane perspective, how could you treat your students like that? I can believe that another group was getting treated even worse than we did with St. Rose. But anyway, so and as I mentioned earlier, the population pool of 18-year-olds in New York State is dwindling. So I expect to see future college closings in the not too distant future. So sadly, let's just hope things will turn around and we don't lose any more valuable institutions that are helping train our future workforce. Anyway, I'm thankful that you stuck around, and please give this video a thumbs up so that you can help me spread the message. Anyway, thanks again, and thanks so much to everybody who watches to the very end.